The following presentation is a live recording of Crystal Dynamics, the Basics, from Eye of the Cat in Long Beach, California. Master Ho is a certified Crystal Awareness Associate of Dale Walker, the author of the Crystal Book. He is a psychic, metaphysical, and UFO researcher, lecturer, and co-founder of Heidi Ho Enterprises, located in North Hollywood, California.
I am very pleased to be here at Eye of the Cat. I want to thank Judith for having me here, and Merlin for letting me set up. Before I begin, when I come into these kind of classes and into an area for the first time, I never really know how many people know nothing about crystals, how many people know a lot about crystals. For myself, I am one of Dale Walker's crystal teachers. Dale Walker wrote a book called The Crystal Book, which you can see over there on the shelf. And that particular book is important because it was the very first book on how to use crystals. Until that book was written, most of the books on crystals would tell you what the healing value of the stone was, what the energy value of the stone was, and then it didn't tell you whether you were supposed to eat them, sleep on them, or graft them to your skin. And for me, that was very frustrating when I was growing up because I always knew that the crystal had something. And I loved to hold them, and I had a few pieces around, but I never was able to determine how to use it. And then Dale wrote the Crystal Book, and that was the first book that really gave you simple techniques. And from there, most of the other books have used that as a reference. Well, Dale has been into Southern California a number of times. Heidi Ho Enterprises, which is my business, handles all of Dale's Southern California appearances. And I teach Dale Walker's workshops. Of course, since that book has come out, there have been a lot of other people doing crystals. There's been a lot of books written, although most of them seem to pretty much repeat what the other books say. There are a lot of books out that are very good books, and the interest in crystals has grown tremendously. If the little bookstores and the various metaphysical shops don't reflect that, the public do. The fact is that so many people are wearing crystals now, and say 3 years ago, no one was interested in them at all. The interest has really just been in the last 3-4 years. So what I like to do is begin with a few questions, and that gives me an opportunity to determine what area you folks are interested in. So does anybody have any questions about crystals before we begin? Yeah.
Somebody told me when you select a crystal, you should just pick it up and hold it in your hand, and if you feel good about that one, if it feels warm to you, or if you just particularly like that one, and I picked up some of them, and some didn't do anything. Some felt a little warm, some felt a little warmer than others. Other than that, how do you choose a crystal?
I wouldn't say that warmth is the criteria for choosing a crystal. How do you choose a crystal? Well, that depends on your level of knowledge. If you know what different crystals do, then you will make your selection based on what you want and need. But if you're just beginning and you want to buy a crystal, you have to use your intuitive senses. If you can't pick something logically, you've got to use your intuition. And that's really the best way to pick up any crystal, for yourself or anyone else. But warmth does not necessarily mean anything. Crystals will hold a vibration. They'll hold energy from anyone who's ever touched them. So for example, if I were to hold a crystal for a moment and put it down and walk away from the table, and then you were to walk over and pick it up, it would feel warm. But if you find a crystal that you feel comfortable with, that you like, that you feel some affinity for, that's the way to pick a crystal. And then as you become more knowledgeable, you'll pick your crystals based on what you want them for, what you need them for. Yes, sir.
Are you talking about little pieces of crystal, or just any?
I'm talking about any crystal.
Ball as well?
Absolutely, any crystal. Any crystal at all. Other questions? Yes, sir.
I have one.
Different colors of crystals, do they put out a particular type of vibration? And what level of vibration is it that it's putting out? Do you know?
I can't answer that on a scientific basis. I can answer that on a metaphysical basis, which is that the crystals will put out energy hinging on their color. The same way we use different colors in metaphysics, the same is true pretty much with candles, incense, various things fall into different patterns. Red has certain vibrations, yellow others. The same is true with crystals. For example, just as an example, the amethyst, which is purple, is considered the spiritual stone, and that works with the upper chakra centers. And later on, perhaps, because I'll take questions at the end as well, we can go through some of the different colors and talk about what they're for. Very quickly, just a couple of the basic ones. The amethyst is the purple, the spiritual. Rose quartz, which you can see on the right board on the bottom right. Mike, can you just point to the rose quartz for me? It'd be a big help if you can just stay there for 1 second. That deals more with emotional balance. The green, which is on the same board on the other side, deals more with the physical body. Golden citrine, we have a piece right up there. Same board, Mike. Okay, that's actually topaz. There's the golden citrine. That's yellow, deals more with active mental states. Lapis deals more with the mental state, but on a psychic level, and it's cooling. Right. It's the same as all the other metaphysical things. One of the things that I'm finding I'm starting to tell my classes now, and I'll mention it here too, is that whatever you get into, whatever your interests are, and in this case, some of you are interested in crystals. Some of you will be interested in crystals simply in terms of what happens when I wear them, how can I hold them, how can I meditate with them. Anything you get interested in, it's really important to have a good foundation. And if you are one of the people who's going to go off and do more with crystals than just wear them or maybe hold them on occasion when you meditate, I would urge you to get involved in some sort of basic metaphysical classes if you haven't already. Learn your basics. We just did a teacher's certification, and this was the one thing we had to say to them too, is to learn the basics. If, for example, you know what the different colors mean and how they are used, then even if no one was here to tell you what the stones would be good for, you could go over there and pretty much surmise based on color. So give yourself a good foundation in the work that you do. Other questions? Yes?
I noticed all the stones you have up there are not crystal per se. Is it any stone, like
what stones up there are not crystal per se? I need to know what you mean by that.
Well, crystal generally is a form, is a crystalline form, and yeah, it can be cloudy, but generally speaking, you can see through it.
Most of the crystal that's on the table falls into that category. You're talking about clear quartz. Clear quartz, which is much like what I'm holding here, is quartz. But almost everything over there is another form of quartz.
Okay.
They are all different forms or offshoots of quartz. The amethyst is just the purple quartz, and then there's rose quartz, which is pink. And there's smoky over there too, which is the dark one. And that is, if you move over to Mike, right in the center, there's another piece of smoky. It's the dark one. But they're all quartz.
Okay.
And agate is like a cousin of quartz. Tourmaline is like a cousin of quartz.
What about lapis?
Lapis is quartz. It's an offshoot of quartz. It's the blue one. And that's the one for the psychic development. And it's also the calming, cooling one. When I do lectures, and sometimes I'll do like the Whole Life Expo or something like that, and I'll talk for 3 days straight for 18 hours a day, and I'll wear lapis around my throat. When I had laryngitis, that was something that Dale looked at me one day and suggested I try. And within 2 hours, I was at least able to make enough noise to be heard. Remember something about working with crystals and stones. I know that you folks are not the average people. By that I mean that if I were to go to, let's say, a baseball game and ask the people in the audience how many of them would be interested in learning and working with stones, most of them would giggle and pay no attention. In that sense, you're not the average people. So this isn't as necessary to be said to you as perhaps to other people, but still keep this in mind. All the ancient groups worked with stones. All the ancient cultures worked with stones. And when you're in school and the teachers say something like, and they tried to heal with stones, and then the teacher giggles, as if to say, well, if they'd known about aspirin, they wouldn't have bothered. Remember something. The ancients may not have been as advanced as we are, but they did know about stones, and they use them because they had a level of success. If you work on 100 people and 100 people keel over immediately, then you're going to put the stones away and look for something else. But all of the ancient groups worked with stones because they had a level of success. The problem is, as we come into the 80s, it's been a lot longer than that, but even now, that knowledge has been lost. That knowledge has been forgotten. Until very recently, most of the work done in our society with quartz has been with technology. And maybe that's where I should start. Because quartz has certain properties that we know about and are using scientifically. Just as a simple example of this, and a simple way to remember, is that crystal has 5 basic properties. We remember it as FATTS, or FATS. And that stands for focus, amplify, transform, transmit, and store. And those 5 properties are used every day in technology. An example of using crystal to focus is lasers. If you did not have crystal, you would not have lasers. And an example of amplification would be television and radio. Again, if you didn't have crystal, you wouldn't have television and radio. And the point here is, if it was not scientific, if it didn't have these properties, if it was mind over matter, television, radio, lasers would go away just because you don't believe in them. I know lots of people who don't believe in television, and believe me, it's not going anywhere. Transforming, ultrasound. Transmitting, computers. And storing, computer chips and quartz watches. So you see, all the things that we're going to be dealing with, while they won't be necessarily this entrenched in science, have a scientific background. It is not just mind over matter. Because I get people who simply believe the only reason the crystals work are because we think they will. They will work whether you think they will or not. They'll work better if you think they will, because you're not blocking the energy with a thought form that goes, this isn't going to happen. But they'll work one way or the other. Now then, everything we're going to do in the next couple of hours, and I expect that in 2 hours we'll get a lot of information through this group, everything we're going to do will hinge on those 5 properties. So if you see things as we go along and you go, I don't know, this is mind over matter, keep in mind, it's science. It's based on science. When you get a piece of crystal from anyone, we suggest that what you do is you cleanse it. Because crystal will store energy. It will take an imprint from anyone who touches it. Now that may or may not be good. But when you buy a piece of crystal, you don't know who's touched it ahead of time. The crystals that I've brought in here, and I do have to apologize that I don't have a wider selection today, but we're doing 2 expos in Los Angeles, as well as my being here. So we've divided our stock up between the 3 of us. But even with these, which I do go to a lot of trouble to make sure they stay pretty clean, people will still walk up and touch them. And understand me, I'm not talking positive and negative here. I'm not talking good people versus bad people. What I'm talking about is somebody may pick it up and be a little depressed. Or someone may touch one and just have had a fight with somebody and still be a little angry. And the crystal will store that energy in it. And you don't know how far back those crystals go, or anyone's crystals go. And you don't really want to take on that energy. So the first thing we suggest when you get a piece of crystal is that you put it into sea salt. Now you can get sea salt at any of the health food stores. Or...
Judith has it here also.
Does she? Buy it here then. Or salt water. And for that we suggest half a cup of sea salt to a gallon of water. Or if you have it around, you could use holy water. And leave it in there for 7 days. Now the reason we suggest 7 days is because we just cannot say how long it will take for a crystal to clear. Some crystals may take an hour, some crystals may take 7 days. But 7 days is enough time for that crystal to be cleared out, for the energies to be neutralized, And then when you pick up the crystal, it only has your energy in it. And this way you're not going to be susceptible to other people's emotions, other people's mental states, sometimes even other people's spiritual states. It's just going to be your energy in the crystal. Now, if someone touches it, you could throw it back into the salt overnight if you want. But after you put the crystal in the salt and then you finally take the crystal out, throw the salt away. We know one lady whose whole family got very ill, and she called up and she tried to determine what the problem was, and we went down, and it took a while to figure it out, but she'd saved herself 35 cents. She put the salt back into the salt shaker and was pouring the salt all over her food. Okay? Crystals are not dangerous. They don't really carry negative energies or anything. But it's like everything else. You learn how to take care of your equipment. You learn how to take care of the things that you work with. Another thing I want to mention is lead crystal. I don't know if any of you are wearing lead crystal, or Vienna crystal, or Austrian crystal. It is not crystal. That is glass, and it has lead in it. Do you have a piece of lead crystal in the store? Mm-hmm. Okay, because what I'm going to do in a moment is demonstrate some of the things that you can do with crystals, and I'll also demonstrate this with the lead crystal.
It's like a little pyramid, okay?
That's fine, as long as it's lead. Lately, some of the stores that are selling lead crystal, because they're becoming aware of the fact that people are starting to realize the difference, are now telling people that what they're selling is melted quartz. Thank you. That's lead. Are saying that they're selling melted quartz. Glass is technically melted quartz, but it's still got lead in it, and it's still lead crystal. So you have to be aware now that people are out there and they're saying all sorts of things. And it's a little sad for me, because what will happen is somebody will run over and say, look, the beautiful crystal I just bought. And I hate to disappoint anyone and tell them that they just bought lead crystal. I don't like to see that marvelous look of happiness suddenly turn to one of absolute depression and hostility. I've seen quite a bit of that. Let me begin a couple of demonstrations here and just show you some of the things that happen with quartz. And Ken, are you wearing any? Because you just happen to be in a perfect position for this. One of the things that we've talked about, actually before I do that, let me do something else. How many of you have crystals again? Let me see that. All right, is there anyone in here who did not bring crystals? Because what I'm going to do, in fact, what we'll do is I'll pass one of these out to everybody anyway. You can just pass this round and take a rose quartz. If you have your own crystal and want to hold it while we talk, and that's all right too, this is a gift from us to you. And as they pass that back,
The only thing I do have on would be a zircon. I would let that fix in
it's okay,
anywhere.
no problem. And while they're passing that around, let me introduce you to the nickel-plated dingle-dangle. The nickel-plated dingle-dangle is really called an aura meter, and it's a dowsing device. Used to be that I'd get up in front of groups and spend 10-15 minutes talking about dowsing and what the aura meter does. The aura meter measures changes in energy. As I walk towards somebody, regardless of who, at some point what will happen is it will turn, showing me where an energy field is. Now, as I said, I used to spend a lot of time defending, rationalizing dowsing. I now have it down to 2 sentences. Every oil company in the world uses dowsers. Every mining company in the world uses dowsers. If it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us. Ken, can I get you to stand up for a moment, please? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure his energy field. Now, you know that everybody has an aura. And the aura will extend 2 to 3 feet from the body in the average person. That's because the average person is usually out of balance. When a person is in balance, you will get a reading of more like 3.5, 4 feet. But what I'm going to do is measure the inner band of the aura. because the aura works in different bands. And in the average person, the inner band of the aura is 6 to 8 inches. And in this case, it's exactly what I get. 6, 7 inches. Let me do it one more time. Half of you can watch my hand to see it doesn't turn. The other half of you can watch the tip of the aura meter to see it does. Okay? Now then, I'm going to take a piece of crystal from over here. And I'm going to take, these are what we call water crystals. They're just little crystal chips that you can put in water, and we'll talk more about that later. But I'm going to take the smallest, junkiest piece that I can find in the basket, because I can prove a couple of different points at the same time. Can I get you to hold this in your left hand over the heart chakra? Now, what this is, the way he's holding it would be the same way he would wear it if he were wearing a piece of quartz. And as I approach him with the aura meter, look where it is now. How far would you say that is? Because you're in a much better position to tell me how far you think I am from him.
30 inches to 3 feet.
Let's say 30 inches, 3 feet. Let me do that one more time. Now then. Just got to watch out for this, the edge of this chair here. Okay, same place again. I want to take it down for a moment. Start from back here. And you'll see that we go right back to 6, 7 inches. Now, I'm going to usually get in just a second, Ken, but give me a moment. What we're showing you is what happens when you wear a crystal. When you wear a crystal, it amplifies the energy field around the body. The same way it amplifies for radio and television. It's one of the 5 basic properties. Now then, what good is it? Big deal. So it's amplifying the energy field. Does that mean anything? Well, when you amplify the aura, what is your aura? Your aura is your buffer zone. It's your filter. It's what keeps you from picking up everybody else's emotions or picking up everybody else's mental and spiritual states as well. Most of you have probably had the experience of feeling great going to a movie, sitting on a bus, whatever, and you feel fine, and then somebody else comes in and sits down near you. Pretty soon you start to feel a little edgy, a little uncomfortable, and you're not quite sure why. Well, what that is it's their energy or aura is overlapping with the person next to theirs, and you're starting to pick up what that person is feeling. If you increase the aura, you increase that buffer zone, you don't pick up as much. And that's working on the emotional, mental, and spiritual levels. That's not bad. But when you wear a crystal over the heart chakra, which is an energy center. Everybody in here know what a chakra is? It's an energy center. When you wear it over the chakra, you're wearing it over one of the glands. You're wearing it over the thymus gland. And the thymus gland is your immunity to disease. So when you wear a piece of quartz, it's working on the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual levels. What else is there? That's the whole thing. So we do suggest that people wear a piece of quartz. I'm going to ask him if he'll put the lead crystal where he was holding the other piece before. And now, as we approach him, I'll make sure I don't get wound up in the cord here. Look what happens.
Whoa.
The lead is acting as a shield. It is cutting off all the energy flow. The body does not want lead. So for those of you who have lead crystal, this is my suggestion. Take it off your bodies and hang it in the window where it'll reflect the light and make pretty little prism patterns on the walls, and where it won't hurt anybody, especially you. Just as crystal amplifies energy, crystal will also energize thought energy. Most of you folks probably know this, but for the rest of you, thought is energy. Many of you probably think that a thought is something you have and then poof, it's gone. Some of you, because of the work that you've done, and I'm tapping into a few of you here, know what I'm talking about. But for the rest of you, thought is energy, and it is the most powerful energy there is. There is nothing more powerful than thought. Wait a minute, ho! Somebody says from the back of the room, usually at these presentations. What about the atomic bomb? Thought isn't more powerful than the atomic bomb. Well, you see, the reason I say that thought is the most powerful energy there is because there is nothing that has been created by man that did not begin with thought, including the atomic bomb. Everything begins with thought and then eventually manifests into the physical. So you can amplify thought energy using crystals as well. And we have techniques that we do teach in the workshop on how to do that, how to amplify the different types of energy. That's something that's a little too complex to go into a lot of detail here right now. That's why we do all these different workshops. In addition to the 2-day workshop that we do, I also have approximately 20 different nights on advanced crystal work. So there's a lot of material, and I will share as much as I can with you today. I mentioned that we can use crystals to focus energy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back now through those 5 things. I've already shown you A for amplification. And wearing a crystal is the most passive thing you can do and probably one of the most important. But I'm going to demonstrate a few other things that you can do with crystals using those 5 properties. So let's begin with focusing energy. Because you can use crystal to focus energy, and that's exactly what we do when we use crystals for healing. Now, what do I mean when I say use crystals for healing? Obviously, if somebody has a broken leg, that's a physical problem and you have to deal with it as such. But all illness and disease stems from something that is either emotional, psychological, mental in nature. It's an imbalance. And when that imbalance is not corrected, it will eventually become a physical problem. And then, of course, you have to deal with it as a physical problem. When energy is blocked going to the cells, then the cell begins to die. When the cell begins to die, then the organ begins to die. When the organ begins to die, you get sick. So what we do, and I don't use the term healing professionally, is we balance the energy of the body. We redirect the flow of energy so that the energy goes to the cell gets better so the organ gets better so you feel better. And we have techniques that we teach in our workshop on how to use that. For example, we have something called an aura scan. And the aura scan works very much like acupuncture or acupressure, except that you don't need to know anything about meridians or energy points or any of that stuff, because the crystal does all the work for you. And that is so simple, believe it or not, that's so simple that we can teach 7-year-olds how to do it. And we can teach them to do it in a matter of minutes. You'll also be glad to know that we can teach older people how to do it. They don't do it as well as the 7-year-olds, but they come close. We have a Pardon? It takes 2 days. No, we can teach that in a matter of minutes, but it does take a while for them to tap into their own abilities and their own sensing. And we have something for the nervous system, the neurological, and something for the circulatory system. And then, especially some of you who were here real early, and I don't know if any of you were watching what I was doing or not, something for balancing the brain hemispheres. And that's important because, you see, most people are either left or right brain dominant. Left brain is the logical side. That's the side that balances the checkbook and takes care of the 9-to-5 job and drives the car on the freeway, God willing. Although I don't know, I've seen some of these people out here drive. Maybe a totally right brain operation. The right brain is the intuitive side. And you use both sides all the time, but you have a dominance of one or the other depending on what you're doing. But when you balance the brain hemispheres, you get an equal balance. And of course, what you want in life is balance. The key to everything is balance. But when you balance the brain hemispheres, you do something else. Those of you who know chakras probably know this as the brow or third eye. Well, it is the brow, it is not the third eye. The third eye is a mixture of the pineal and pituitary glands, which are inside the head, and when they are activated, they work through the brow chakra to give you the third eye effect. Balancing the brain hemispheres activates the third eye. In most adults, when they do autopsies, those glands are virtually atrophied. But it's not the way it's supposed to be. So that is an example of how we can balance energies. And we can teach these techniques very quickly. We have something else called the four-color healing, which actually goes into the consciousness of the cell. You know, cells have a consciousness. And while they don't discuss baseball and politics and drive cars or anything, they go, hi, I'm a little liver cell, or hi, I'm a little gallbladder cell, and I'm doing my job, God willing. We have a technique to go into the consciousness of the cells when they're not doing their job and raise them up. And that's what we teach on a physical level in the workshops. But I left out the very first technique, the easiest technique, because I want to teach you how to do that here. And that's for balancing the chakras. Very, very quickly, you know that you have 7 major centers. The crown, which is at the very top of the head, the brow just up and above the eye, brows, and I couldn't remember what they were called, just between and above the eyebrows, the throat, which is right here, the little indentation in the throat, the heart, which is where most people think their heart is, the solar plexus, which is this bulge right here. I'm sorry, ladies, you don't have this bulge right here. If you had this bulge right here, it would be right there. The spleen chakra, which is right below the navel, and the root chakra, which is in the groin. Now, those energy centers are where all the energy goes in and out of the body. And when they are in balance, you are at the peak of your abilities. You are in the here, the now. You are right on top of things. And when they're out of balance, which is the way they normally are in most people, you are not in control of things the way you should be. Life suddenly is something that happens to you while you are minding your own business, as it were. But you really want to be in balance because you want those energies flowing properly. And, of course, you want the energy field because you want to have that buffer zone. And so we teach you how to balance the chakra. And it's really quite simple. How many of you are holding crystals that have points on them? For you, I'm going to suggest that you hold the crystal in your left hand with the point pointing in towards the wrist. The reason for that is because there's a general energy flow through the body. Energy goes in through the left hand and out through the right. That is the way your body is set up to work. Now, some people will say, well, no, I do it the other way. I send with my left hand and receive with my right. And that's simply because mentally they have changed the flow of energy. And you can mentally change the flow of energy. But the natural flow is left in, so we hold the crystal with the point facing in towards our wrist, and right out. And if we had 2 crystals, that's how I would hold them. Left in, right out. If you're holding a crystal, such as the tumbled rose that we passed out, and that has no point, you can just hold that in your hand normally. It will still work. That's all right. I'm sorry, was there a question? Yes.
What if it has points both ends?
If it has a point and it's double terminated, then you may hold either point going in. Because with double terminated, it goes both ways. While you're holding that, I want to teach you something else as well. That is called the Light Invocation.
Did you repeat it?
And I will certainly repeat it, and I will even do more than repeat it. I will tell you what it means. I invoke. Some of you have heard of an affirmation. An affirmation is something that you would like to have come into being. In its loosest definition, it's what you might call a wish. But an invocation is calling. It is a command. It is a demand. So know, first of all, that this isn't just something you'd like to have happen. This is something that is your right. I invoke the light of the Christ within. Now, we're not talking here about Jesus. When I say the light of the Christ within, we're not talking about Jesus, the man that they put on the cross. Jesus was the Christ, or became the Christ, because he tapped into his full abilities and worked with them. It's the Christ consciousness. So this is not a religious statement. You are calling upon that energy within yourself. And virtually the only way that you will ever tap into that energy within yourself is to call upon it. So I invoke the light of the Christ, which means love, within. I am a clear and perfect channel. What that is saying is that you are opening yourself up to receive the universal energy. And if you could see it, it's almost like an upside-down pyramid coming in like so. When I first started in this field, psychics would look at me and say, I'd look at them and go, boy, I worked all day, I'm tired. And they'd say to me, well, you should have called upon the universal energy. And I go, okay, how do I do that? Well, you call upon the universal energy. Oh, okay. Hello? Universal energy? And I made an interesting discovery. Most people who talk about working with universal energy don't have the faintest idea how to tap into it, really. This is how you do it. I am a clear and perfect channel, brings in that universal energy. Light, as opposed to dark, is my guide, which is why we call this the Light Invocation. And just by saying it, you increase the auric field around the body. You clear out the energy around you. I invoke the light of the Christ within. I am a clear and perfect channel. Light is my guide. And you saw what happened over here. Now then, if we take these two different things and slam them together and invoke the light and balance the chakras, don't you wonder what's going to happen? Because what we're going to do is we're going to measure these two in just a minute and show you what's going to happen. So let me begin. What was that? The room's not long enough. That may be true. How many of you meditate? A few of you. You spend the first 20 minutes of meditation on a physiological basis, the first 20 minutes, balancing the chakras and balancing the brain hemispheres. If you could do it in, let's say, 2 minutes, you'd have all that extra time to put into more important work. The fastest techniques that we know for balancing the chakras, meditation takes about 15-20 minutes. The Reiki people take about, a Reiki master can do it in about 10 to 12 minutes. The technique I'm going to show you will probably take you a minute altogether. And when you get yourself in balance and continue to balance for a while, you'll be able to knock it down to 30 seconds. I would say that that alone was worth the price of admission this morning if you can learn to do that. So, I am going to show you how you balance your chakras. And then we can do it together, and then we'll measure these two and see what happened. So holding the crystal in your left hand, the first thing I do is I do the light invocation. This gentleman asked me if you say it out loud. You don't have to say it out loud. You can say it to yourself. But when you say it out loud, you add the power of sound to it. So you give it more power. So it's best to say it out loud. I invoke the light of the Christ within. I am a clear and perfect channel. Light is my guide. And now I begin, holding the crystal in my left hand. I use my right thumb and I put it on the crown. And in my mind, I visualize, or make believe I see, a half-moon meter like a speedometer with a needle somewhere in there. And wherever the needle is, because it doesn't matter where the needle is, I move it into the center for perfect balance. It should only take a second or two. If, as we do this, you find you have any trouble with it, if for some reason your needle doesn't want to move, take a deep breath, and as you exhale, mentally move your needle, because you are in control of your body. Then, the brow, same thing. The heart, the throat, same thing. The heart, same thing. Solar plexus, same thing. It should only take a couple of seconds for each one. Spleen chakra, same thing, and root chakra, the same thing. Now, what I have done is I have balanced the chakras with themselves. The next thing I do is taking my thumb, I draw an imaginary line down the front of my body, and I visualize all those meters stacked up, and that line is all the needles in one straight, bright, continuous line. That balances the chakras with each other. And the last thing I do is go key in, and lock, and that locks it in place. That's all there is to it. If you will, crystals in your left hand. Feet on the floor. Unless, of course, you're sitting on the floor. I think that's just Merlin. Merlin, the cosmic cat. Merlin was all over the crystals when we tried to unload them. They were just all over the table because cats love them. And, if you will, in unison, folks, the light invocation. I invoke the light of the Christ within. I am a clear and perfect channel. Light is my guide. And now if you take your right thumb, we use the thumb because the thumb is neutral, and on the top of the head, for most of you it'll help to close your eyes, and visualize the half-moon meter like a speedometer. And when you see the meter, see the needle. And when you see the needle, bring it into the center for perfect balance. And when it's steady, then you move down to the brow. If you fall behind the rest of us, don't worry about that. This is not a race. When you get the brow and get it lined up in the center, the throat. And lock that one in for perfect balance. And from the throat down to the heart. Locking it in for perfect balance and harmony. From the heart to the solar plexus. That one will probably take the longest for most of you. Solar plexus tends to. Locking that in. Then the spleen, which is about 3 fingers below the navel. Locking it in. And from there, the root chakra in the groin. Lock that in for perfect balance. And when you get to the groin and you've locked that one in, now taking your right thumb, draw that line down the front of the body and see all those needles in one straight, bright, continuous line. And when you see all the needles move into the center and lock in so it's one straight, bright, continuous line, it's left lymph, right lymph, and then lock it in the heart. Domini, 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 you're all Catholics now. Let's wait till everybody is done. Give another second. Where's Merlin? Merlin's the one who needs to have his chakras balanced.
Merlin's probably asleep in the front window.
Okay. Now, what I'd like to do, because I can't measure all of you right now, I could, but that would be a whole different workshop. Let's have you, if you would, stand up in front of Ken. And if you remember, without the crystal, if you remember when we measured him the first time, he had about 8 inches. When we did the light invocation, he had about 30 inches. And now, how many inches would you say that is?
6, 7 feet.
6 or 7 feet. You see, the high masters, the Jesuses, the Buddhas, he says as if there were bunches of them just hanging outside the front store, had these huge auras because they constantly balanced themselves and increased their powers, increased their energy fields. If I can get you to sit down and you just stand up for 1 second. With this gentleman, I balanced the chakras from a distance. The first time he had about 4 inches, and we got up to about, what was it when we did it the second time? No, it wasn't 6 foot the first time.
No.
What was it when we...
A couple inches, 3 or 4 inches.
3 or 4 inches, and then when after I did the balancing, it was about 3 feet?
Quite a ways.
Okay. 30 inches, 3 feet. It's even stronger. What would you say that is? About 7.5, 8 feet? Is that about right?
Yes.
At least.
At least 7.5, 8 feet. Thank you. So you can begin to appreciate what balancing the chakras will do for you. And here is what I suggest. I suggest that you balance the chakras every morning when you first get up, and every night when you go to bed. Here comes the key word, folks: minimum. I suggest that you balance the chakras anytime you feel tired or feel like you're under any form of stress. You can do it so quickly. If you're at work, for example, and you get stress from your employer or from a co-worker, just as an example, run into the men's room or ladies' room and take a second and balance yourself. You'll be amazed how that will calm you down. Other forms of stress: a crummy ride home on the freeway. Cigarettes, a great form of stress. Coffee, marvelous form of stress. Whenever you do any of those things, balance yourself. An argument with a loved one, an argument with a not-so-loved one. Mercury retrogrades. I don't know how many astrologers I got here. We got one of those coming up. Balance yourselves. The more you do it, the easier it gets. And the more you do it, the more control you have. We talk about the fact that you create your own reality. It's hard to create your own reality when you have to fight your own body first. Okay? We pause for a second and see if we have any questions at this point. Give you folks a chance to let that sink in.
I only had a question about like where you're wearing the crystal.
Mm-hmm.
You specifically put it over the heart.
We suggest that you wear it over the heart because when you wear it over the heart, you're wearing it over a major energy center or chakra. When you carry it in your pocket, and I constantly have people walk up to me, real proud, "Hey, I got my crystal, it's right here in my pocket somewhere." That's not over a major energy center. And of course, if it's over any center or near any center at all, it's near the root chakra, which probably doesn't need activation in the first place. Not for most of us.
So
I was thinking more like an earring. Like I wear one hanging from my ear, so it's...
I would not wear one if it were me. Because, well, we'll get into a whole thing about ears another time, but I would not wear one. If I was going to wear any, I would wear 2. Because when you wear quartz earrings, it affects the balancing of the brain hemispheres. Now, for example, you just showed me the left ear. I don't know if that's the ear you happened to wear it in, but that was the ear you happened to pull when you asked the question.
I changed back and forth. That was where I was going to wear it.
And that would activate the left side.
If I wear it back and forth.
I would wear 2 for balance. Again, folks, in everything you do, you want to be balanced. Okay?
the men would wear it around their neck then.
That would be a good place to wear it, yes. Okay, other questions at this point?
Wouldn't it be a good idea to avoid wearing earrings, though?
Unless there's a clip-on or something, would you destroy some energy or something by sticking something through your earlobe or something?
You really want me to get into this with all these women who are wearing earrings, right? When you wear an earring, when you get a hole put in your ear for an earring, we forget sometimes that there are other belief systems and cultures that do other kinds of things. One of the kind of things, let me just put this in the pocket so that I can stop banging into it. One of the kind of things that you do, or that we're talking about, is ear acupuncture, which is done in the Orient, where they acknowledge that the whole ear has different points on it which affect different parts of the body. So when you go ahead and slam a hole into your ear, and unfortunately the way this is most commonly done is a friend will come to you and say, I've got a hammer, a nail, and an ice cube. What happens is that you put a hole into one of these energy centers and you don't know what it's going to do to you. For myself, were I female this lifetime, I would have a clip-on. But that's just an opinion. Any other questions before we continue? Yeah.
Okay, when somebody's depressed or something, they happen to notice you're wearing a crystal,
Mhm.
they come up and touch it without you giving a chance to back off,
Mhm.
and they're like depressed, and you start feeling depressed. How long would that last? Or...
Well, let me go back to the beginning of that question. First of all, let's talk about people touching your crystal. We have a couple of different techniques for when people touch your crystals. There is the sure, go ahead, and I will do that if it's somebody that I know and I'm not too worried about. We have the hand over the crystal, which is the please don't touch my crystal. You may look, it's very pretty, but please don't touch it. It's gone through, and I simply say it's gone through a certain ceremony and I'd rather not have it touched. We have another technique. It's not always as popular. It doesn't win you a lot of friends, but it's called the right hook. I am flabbergasted at people who do that too. The American Indian does something very interesting when, say, white man comes into town. They have lots of little tests to determine whether that person really can be trusted. And an example of this is maybe they'll take you into a room and they'll have a beautiful little feathered ornament hanging from the ceiling or hanging on the door. And if you go over and you just touch it without asking, they know that you're not to be trusted. All right? To us, that might just be considered courtesy, and it might not be a big deal. But the key is that you're at least respecting them. In line with that, I am amazed at how many times I do expos, and people will walk up to me and not only grab at the stones, but pull me down hallways going, Marjorie, look at this, look what I found. If someone touches my crystal in that way, I have techniques for clearing it immediately, for mentally getting the energy out of the crystal right away. But the other thing you can do, and still probably should do, doesn't hurt, is to take the crystal off and put it into sea salt overnight. The first time when you cleanse your crystal and you put it into sea salt, you leave it in for the 7 days, you take the crystal out, you throw the salt away. Now, every so often you might want to put your crystal in salt, not only because other people touch them, but because you also go through emotional highs and lows. And if you've had a really terrible day, you might just want to put that crystal into sea salt and just get rid of that energy.
If you
So
don't have the
that-
sea salt,
Yeah.
I've also heard of ways of just running it over the tap water.
No.
What about Clorox?
First of all, what we're getting... I don't even want to know who asked that one. But I'll answer them anyway. No, I don't use Clorox. And what we're getting into is the difference between cleansing and charging. It's interesting to me that a lot of people in this field don't seem to know the difference. Cleansing is getting the energy out of it. Charging is putting energy into it. Now, when I use my crystals, I always rinse them off anyway. That's got to do with negative and positive ions. But putting a crystal under running water is one way to charge a crystal. You see, you can charge a crystal a number of different ways. You can charge a crystal by letting it sit in the sun. You can charge a crystal by letting it sit under the moonlight. You can charge a crystal by putting a crystal anywhere where there's a lot of energy being exchanged. That's what makes hospitals and cemeteries great places to charge crystals. You can put a crystal underneath a crossroad. Lots of energy there. You can charge a crystal using lasers. And now I'm going to tell you what's the problem with all of those techniques. You are charging the crystal, you're putting energy into it. But it's what I'm going to call ambient energy. It has no direction, no focus. It's just energy. You can charge a crystal mentally. And when you do, you not only put in as much energy as you can with a laser or any of those other techniques, but you also can direct what that energy will be used for. Healing, prosperity, balance. There are so many different ways that you can do it, but mental energy is still stronger than any of the others. So how do you do it? Okay, here's another technique. This is a technique for charging your crystal and to be used anytime somebody touches your crystal and you want to get the energy out of it right away. What you do is you grab your crystal. You could use either hand, but I prefer to use the left. Like so. Just hold the crystal in your hand. And in your mind you see that half moon again, that half moon speedometer. But this time, in your mind, you see the needle all the way over to the right at 100. The left is 0. And you mentally move that needle down to 0, which is symbolic of the energy emptying out of it. And when you get it down to 0 and it's steady, then you mentally fill it again, all the way back up to 100 with your own energy. And when I do that, I also visualize my crystal filling with light as well. And I'll show you what the difference is between those two. Let me take this one. I like this one. I don't know why I keep picking this one up. Maybe meant for me. And I'm going to put this crystal right there. All crystals have an energy field. An interesting thing about crystals is the way the energy comes off. With a crystal, the energy comes off of the sides until you pick it up, and then the energy comes off of the point. Now, most crystals have an energy field left on their own of approximately 5-6 inches. How many inches?
About 3 feet.
About 3 feet. Okay? That's all I did. The same thing I just showed you. And I got a reading from 3 inches to 3 feet.
What about cracks in the center of them?
Cracks in the center? What about cracks in the center?
Is that
The
down?
clarity of a crystal does not matter. In fact, I will go one step further. Clarity in a crystal is something that those of us that really work with crystals don't look for. We tend to look for the crystals that have the cracks in them, the fissures, the inclusions, the rainbows, because they have the most energy. And cloudiness in a crystal does not make any difference. The cloudiness in a crystal is a result of moisture. And as you work with it, the moisture will disappear. This is my personal crystal, and I don't want anyone touching it, but if you can see when I hold it up, that whole crystal used to be all milk. It is crystal clear. So it will go away. That's just moisture in there.
I was told the crack sort of is sort of like a black hole type thing where all the negative energy goes through it.
No,
No.
absolutely not.
Is it okay to use the ocean to...
For the seawater, we don't use the ocean salt water because the truth is most of the salt water that we can get our hands on from the ocean is so terribly polluted that it really isn't marvelous to work with. It's much easier to buy a little bit of salt and mix it yourself and you have clean salt water.
What about a running stream?
A running stream is good for charging a crystal, putting energy into it, but it won't necessarily cleanse it. Anything else at this point?
Fluoride.
Florida?
Yeah, fluoride. Fluoride.
Fluorite.
Fluoride.
Fluorite is not quartz. It is like a cousin of quartz, but it's not quartz. It does not have the same properties. I don't know too many people who use fluorite. There's another thing you can do with crystal. I think it's one of the most important things we'll talk about today, and that's crystalline water. First of all, realize what crystal is. Crystal is, in a sense, fossilized water. It is silica and water combined to make silicon dioxide, and in a sense it's frozen water, crystallized water. And in the same sense, water is liquid crystal. Now, you are approximately 90% water, and the other chemical or the other compound that's in your body is silica. So what does this make you? Giant walking crystals. And this is the real reason why when you go up to a television set or radio and you touch the antenna, why you act as an antenna, it's because of this that's in your body. In fact, there's enough silica in your body that recently in Scientific American there was a book review of a book that was written where the man theorized that man did not evolve from the animal kingdom, but evolved from the mineral kingdom. There's enough silica in your body to substantiate that, and of course it would perhaps explain what it means in the Bible when it talks about coming from the dust of the earth and returning to the dust of the earth. That's theory. But we have learned something about crystalline water. For example, how many of you are drinking tap water? Let me see that again. Okay, not when I get done with you. Now I'll tell you why. Tap water is recycled sewage, which has been chemically treated so that it isn't lethal.
Don't sugarcoat how you feel, though.
Not a bit. They treat it with chlorine and ammonia. And of course, you tap water people will be glad to know when the presentation is over, we have big, healthy glasses of chlorine and ammonia for you so you feel right at home. Then they tell you it's okay to drink the water, but it'll probably kill your fish. I said this at a presentation once to a lady who drinks tap water, and she looked at me and she went, "I work for the Department of Water and Power. Now I know why none of those people drink tap water." For those of you who doubt that this may be true, you know those big blue machines outside of the supermarket? Mm-hmm. Those big blue machines are actually run by the same people who bring you water in those big green sparkly trucks and they sing to you while they put it in. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. Same people. You just pay more when they come to you than if you go to them. Park outside one of those blue machines someday when they come to change the filters and see what's coming out of that water, because that's tap water that's gone through a number of different filters. The problem is, when the water goes through all those different filters, it reaches what we call a state of maximum entropy or confusion. And when you drink that water, it's harder for your body to extract the energy from the water it needs. It stresses the body. With tap water, which I fondly refer to as mud, you've got the same problem. There's so much dirt in it that it is causing stress on the body when you drink it, and your body doesn't get the energy from it that it needs. And anyone who doesn't think that you get energy from water, go home and try this simple experiment. Don't drink any for a few days and see what happens.
Dehydration.
Your body needs that water, and the cleaner the water, the purer the water, the more you're going to get from it. Now over here, we have two glasses, and I'm going to put one glass here. I don't really want to put it on top of that. I'll put it over here. And one glass, the blue one, over here. And we have tap water.
Mm-hmm. Look at it with disgust and disdain.
I did this one day for a presentation, and we used two white glasses. And in one glass, I had put the bottled water. In the other glass, I put the tap water. And I asked for a volunteer, someone who would drink the tap water. And when I showed them the two glasses, all of a sudden the look on their face was just absolutely amazing. It was the first time they had realized that the bottled water was clear and the tap water was yellow. And then they wouldn't do it. But I do need a volunteer who would be willing to drink some tap water for me, so I can show you the difference between them. So would somebody volunteer to drink a little tap water? You got it. I have a piece of quartz here. And what I'm going to do, because you've just seen me pour the water from the same two glasses, let me start off by measuring them. Let me just show you that first. It'll only take a second, and it might be beneficial as we go. The water in the glass, as everything, will put out an energy field about 2-3 inches. Over here with the plastic, it'll be a little less, but about the same. And over here, same thing again. Try it again. Doesn't like the Winchell donuts is what it is. Okay. Now then, I have a piece of quartz here. And what I want to know from you is which glass you would like me to put the piece of quartz into. You get one or the other. And we're going to let it sit there for about a minute. Now what it's doing is it is changing the chemical structure, the atomic structure of the water. Very simply, when you put quartz into water, it moves the molecules closer together so that the gases are released and anything else that might be in the water sinks down to the bottom. In this case, what we're really dealing with is the chlorine gases. For a glass of water, we suggest you leave the quartz in for about 3 minutes. If you have a gallon of water, we suggest that you leave the quartz in overnight, but an hour will at least start the procedure. When I'm in a restaurant, if I don't have a piece of quartz, which is rare these days, I'll actually take the crystal I'm wearing off and plop it into the glass. Yeah, it's real funny. The waitress will come over and look at me and go, "Excuse me, sir, do you know that you have a chain hanging out of that glass of water?" I never know what to say to them. No, it came that way? Yeah, I know it's there. My favorite are the waitresses that will walk by and look at the glass of water and go, "That's very strange, sir. I've never seen an ice cube sink before." But it makes a difference in your body. Can I get you to come up here and let me measure you? And your name is? Megan. Megan? Okay. Now we're going to measure her. And we're showing an energy field of about 3 feet. About 3. Okay. And we're going to ask her to drink a little of this. Before you do, I just want to tell you, just so that you can be assured, I am a minister and I am allowed to do last rites. And you just put that down on as much as you want. If you're thirsty, drink it all. Okay, you can put it down on the chair for a sec. And she's going to stand up. And we're going to give her about 15 seconds for that water to get into her system. I'm going to have to learn a 15-second song, something to keep us all occupied while we do that. And now as we approach her, watch what happens to the tip of the aurimeter.
Wow.
That water is causing so much stress on her body that her field just virtually disappeared. Not only that, I'll bet that water tasted real good, didn't it? Now then, I'm going to ask you to smell and drink this and see if you can determine any kind of difference. We've only had it in there for about 2 minutes, but that's okay.
That's a bit cleaner, yes.
A bit cleaner. Most people notice that the water is sweeter, softer. A lot of that smell is gone.
It smells different too.
Yeah.
And
But
once the water's been sitting out for about a half hour or so any normal outgassing of the chlorine would have occurred.
What about the quantity of crystal? The size?
Let's slow up and go back to the water, and we'll come back to that question. Okay, let's just put that down. And we're going to let it stand. We can put it right there. It's okay. You can finish it if you want, but don't drink the crystal. Okay? And we'll give her about another 5 seconds here, just to give it a chance for the water to get into her system. You remember the first time we did it, we had about 3 feet, and we went down to zip. Now we get a reading of, what do you get? What do you make it? 8 feet?
8 feet, yes.
8 feet. Okay, thank you.
I'm going to have her drink some of the regular tap water again just to show the reaction there.
No, I don't think we'll have her drink any more of that stuff. However, we will be selling crystal water at the end of the presentation. Let me just show you. Putting the crystal into the water makes a real difference. Because I am going up with the aurimeter to the glass, and when I did it the first time, I had about a 2-inch field. I now have about 1.5 feet, maybe more. There's a very big difference. And again, what you put in your bodies will determine how well you can function, how well you'll be able to tap into your abilities. In addition to all of this, we've made an interesting discovery, which is that if you put crystal into water, because of what it does with the molecules, it makes it very hard for algae and bacteria to grow. Therefore, people are starting to put crystals into their pools and spas and discovering they can cut back on the amount of chlorine. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Bill Jenkins' Open Mind show on KABC. If you're not, perhaps you should be. That is on KABC, 9 o'clock on a Saturday night, and it goes for 3 hours. But Bill has brought in a number of different people on a number of different fields. He is a reporter and a journalist. He's not a metaphysician, but he deals with a show that talks about things like free energy devices. We've been on it talking about crystals. He's had some mediums on, lots of different things. One of the best shows. In fact, it is the #1 show in the country in its time slot. No radio station in all of America has as many listeners at that time as Bill Jenkins does. That's KABC, 79 AM, Saturday night at 9:05. And when we did Bill's show, originally, we had given Bill a piece of crystal to let him play with it before we went up to do the show. And we got up there that night, and Bill looked at Dale and myself and said, "Yeah, let's talk crystals." And Dale and I looked at each other like, that's why we came here. We're here to talk crystals. And Bill was like, "No, let's really talk crystals." And none of us can quite understand what's going on. And then he explained that he had accidentally dropped his crystal into his spa and decided, the hell with it, he wasn't going to go down for it. He just covered the thing over, and I'll tell you that it has now been almost a year, and he has only put chlorine into his pool once. He said that was when his grandchildren had come over. He said, "You know what grandchildren do in pools." That's the only time he's put chlorine in. And he has had no growth of bacteria or algae. And John Bedini, who has created a free energy device based on Nikola Tesla's work, came over to study Bill's water because he thought that was real interesting. He is the one who gave us the scientific confirmation on what we felt was happening with the water. So we know that this is true. Of course, if you don't have a pool but want to play with it, you can always put a crystal into your toilet tank. And you know the mineral deposits that you get on the inside of the bowl sometimes? You may find you don't have that at all. There's only one place I do not suggest that you put crystal, and that's in your fish tank. See, when I first got this whole idea, the first thing that went through my mind was, well, if I like the clean water, my fish are going to really love it. And they did. I could tell they did. You could see the way they were swimming. They were having a great time. Even the algae eaters started to come out in the daytime, which is very unusual for an algae eater. And then the next day I discovered something else that my algae eater could do. Float. You see, what I didn't realize was that my algae eater was coming out in the daytime because he wasn't getting the algae he needed. And he died. So I do not suggest that you put crystals in a fish tank if you have anything that lives off the algae in the tank. But for anything else with water, absolutely. Yes, sir.
When you say crystals, are you talking about any size crystal or any color crystal? Or are there preferences for, say, a larger body of water, a larger crystal?
Depending on the amount of water I'm going to work with, I might want to vary the number of crystals I'm working with. What I put in a glass, I might not want to put in a swimming pool because it might take too long. So in a swimming pool, what I might want to do is put in a couple of clusters in the corners, or a cluster in the middle and a couple of pieces in the corners, and that would help. As far as the color, any color will work for that. The clear is probably the preferable one. Any other questions at this point? Yes.
If you put your crystal inside a water cooler, like where the bottle goes, would that work?
It sure does. I have one of those at home, and I have 3 crystals in the base of it. I leave it in there most of the time. When the water goes down, maybe once every couple of months, I'll take them out and put them in the sun for a day just to get some of that sun's energy into it, and then I put it back into the water cooler. The advantage to having a water cooler is this, though. When you have a gallon of water, you can usually tell the difference when you have the crystals in there after a few hours, or if it takes you, a day or two to drink through the gallon, you notice the difference. But a water cooler that's a 5-gallon cooler actually has 9 gallons of water in it. 5 at the top, 4 at the bottom. And that takes a while to go through, which means that by the time you get to those last couple of gallons, that crystal has been in that water a long time. And let me tell you, that's an experience, because it doesn't taste like what any of us think is water. It gets so sweet that it almost tastes like nectar or juice. What we've been talking about are some of the ways that you can use crystals to heal, some of the ways you can use crystals for energy balancing, some of the ways that you can use crystals on physical levels. I've told you some about the workshop from a physical point of view. Let me just mention that although it's called the Crystal Healing Workshop, it does not simply deal with physical healing. We teach you how to go inside your crystals and meet your spiritual guides and teachers. We teach you how to go inside your crystals and use them to release emotional blocks. How to use crystals and telepathy. How to work with crystals in the dream state. And how to build a mind energy generator so that you can send energy anywhere you can possibly imagine. There is so much more that you can do with crystals, but you've got to get your basics down first. One of the things that you can do with crystals is to use them for meditative types of techniques. And for that, you go into your crystal. I'm going to ask those of you who have a crystal that you work with, a clear point, to take them out now. If you take a moment to look at your crystal and hold it like so that you're holding it with the point up, you'll notice that your crystal has 6 sides and comes to some sort of a 6-sided point. Now, some crystals come to a 5-sided point, but that's all right. The 6th side is there, you just can't see it. And when you look at it like that, it doesn't even matter if the point's perfect or not. That's really unimportant. But when you look at it, it looks a little like a crystal house, like a little glass house with 6 sides and a roof. So holding your crystal in your left hand so the point is up, and you look at it like so, I'm going to suggest that we all do the Light Invocation in unison. Again, it's I invoke the light of the Christ within. I am a clear and perfect channel. Light is my guide. I invoke the light of the Christ within. I am a clear and perfect channel. Light is my guide. With your feet flat on the floor. Very good. Now, looking at your crystal, and then closing your eyes, in your mind, hold that image of the crystal as if it were a little glass house with 6 sides and a 6-sided roof. And in your mind, see that crystal getting larger and larger, bigger and bigger. and begin to mentally move towards that crystal, so that as it continues to get larger and larger, and as you move towards it, it does in fact become the size of a 6-sided glass house. And as you walk up towards it, as you move up towards it, there will be an opening. Your opening may be like a door or a window. It may just be an opening like a cave opening. But as you move up to your crystal, find the opening and move through the opening into the center of your crystal. Move through the opening into the center of the crystal. And as you do, let's begin by experiencing what it's like to be inside the crystal. Let's begin by looking up at the top of the crystal. What does the roof of the crystal look like? Is there light coming through the crystal? If so, what color is the light? And now what about the floor of the crystal? What does the floor of your crystal look like? Is it smooth? Is it rough? And what about the walls? What are the walls of your crystal like? Are they smooth or rough? Are they clear or opaque? Do they have color? Now take a moment and listen. Listen inside your crystal. What do you hear inside your crystal? What do you smell inside your crystal? Do you smell anything? What's the temperature like inside your crystal? Is it warm or is it cool? Is it neutral? What does the inside of your crystal feel like? Now I want you to go over to the wall of your crystal and lean forward and lick the wall of your crystal. What does the wall of your crystal taste like? Is it sweet? Is it salty? Is it sour? Or maybe it has no taste. Now leaning forward, with your hands, I want you to place your hands on the wall of the crystal and feel the wall of the crystal vibrate. Feel the wall of the crystal vibrate, and as the wall vibrates, feel that vibration begin to go through your hands, so that your hands start to vibrate at the same vibration as the wall of the crystal, so that your hands can move into the wall of the crystal. And feel that vibration starting to go through your whole body, so that you can move into the wall of the crystal, so that you can become one with the crystal, so that you are the crystal. And as you've completely merged with the crystal, there are two things I want you to realize. One, you are the master of your crystal. You are in control of your crystal. And two, nothing will ever happen to you inside your crystal unless you permit it. You are the master of your crystal, and nothing will ever happen to you inside your crystal unless you permit it. Now just take a moment or so to experience what it's like to be one with the crystal. And now step away from the wall, back into the crystal, back into the center of the crystal. Step away from the wall, back into the center of the crystal, and take another moment to see if anything has changed inside the crystal. The roof, or the light, the floor of the crystal, the walls of the crystal, the sounds in the crystals, the smells, the taste, the temperature. And now from the center of the crystal, begin to move back towards the opening. But before you go through, take one last look around and remember that you are the master of your crystal. Nothing will ever happen inside your crystal unless you permit it. And know that you will be back many, many times again. And each time you go back inside your crystal, it will be easier and easier, and your senses will be more and more vivid. And with that in your mind, go back out through the opening of your crystal, back into your body, back in your seat, and when you're comfortable, open your eyes. If you've not done so already, come back into your body, back in your seat, and open your eyes.
We hope you have enjoyed this taped presentation and welcome your comments and questions. The Light Invocation and Crystal Awareness Techniques, copyright Dale Walker and used with permission. All other material copyright Master Ho, 1985. Any reproduction of this material in whole or in part without the expressed written permission of Master Ho is strictly prohibited. Legal matters aside, be wise as the serpent and gentle as the dove, and may the light always be your guide.